Welcome to Miyconst Hardware. In one of my previous videos I have tested a Xeon E5-2697A V4 in 40 different games, and in this video I'm going to do the same, but with E5-2697 V3. If you're interested in all the technical details in the hardware setup and so on, please watch my first video. Here I'm not going to waste your and my time, and we'll go into the test results straight away. Still, I need to mention that E5-2697 V3 was tested with a Turbo Boost unlock applied, resizable bar enabled, Intel Spectre and Meltdown patches disabled with InSpectre patcher, and I have tested it with the 4 sticks 8GB each DDR4-2133 running in quad-channel memory configuration. So let's go into the test results, starting with the strategy games. With the Turbo Boost unlock applied, V3 Xeons are generally faster than their V4 counterparts, but here only Anno 1800 favors E5-2697 V3. It scores 140-167 FPS against 125-145 FPS with E5-2697A V4. In Cities Skylines, Company of Heroes 3, Frostpunk 2 and Total War 3 Kingdoms, we have a very similar performance between the two Xeons. On average, Xeon V3 renders 80-114 FPS, which is just a few FPS faster than V4 alternative that delivers 75-108 FPS. Ryzen 5 5600 is significantly faster in strategy games. It renders 111-161 FPS. In cozy and racing games, V3 Xeon is able to pull ahead of its V4 competitor. Astroneer, Coral Island F1-23 and Forza Horizon 4 are all delivering slightly better results with E5-2697 V3 compared to E5-2697A V4. On average, the difference is noticeable, but not dramatic. V3 scores 131-180 FPS, while V4 is good for 113-161 FPS. At the same time, Ryzen 5 5600 is far ahead. It renders 158-121 FPS. Many modern adventure games are well optimized for multi-core CPUs, so the results here are all over the place. Still, E5-2697 V3 is faster than E5-2697A V4 in all tested games. The biggest difference can be seen in Starfield, where E5-2697 V3 delivers 38-82 FPS, which is on average even better than Ryzen 5 5600. It scores 44-78 FPS. E5-2697A V4 is good for 33-75 FPS. Alan Wake 2 is another example where V3 is noticeably faster than V4, 71-120 FPS against 60-80 FPS. In Borderlands 3, Chernobylite, HITMAN 3, Horizon Zero Dawn, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Star Wars Outlaws, and Red Dead Redemption 2, the difference between V3 and V4 Xeons is not that noticeable. On average, we get 91-140 FPS with E5-2697 V3, 80-130 FPS with E5-2697A V4, and 92-153 FPS with Ryzen 5 5600. Online shooters are very hard to test consistently, so take these results with a grain of salt. Still, the overall picture is the same. E5-2697 V3 is slightly faster than E5-2697A V4. On average, after testing Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty Warzone, Wolfenstein Youngblood, Apex Legends, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 2042, Rainbow Six Extraction, Fortnite and Valorant, we get 121-210 FPS with E5-2697 V3. 105-200 FPS with E5-2697A V4, and 142-252 FPS with Ryzen 5 5600. Very similar picture can be seen with the action games. Xeon E5-2697 V3 is consistently 5-10 FPS faster than E5-2697A V4. Here I tested the Cyberpunk 2077, Gears 5, Metro Exodus, Returnal, Stalker 2, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, Far Cry 6, Watch Dogs Legion, and GTA 5. On average, V3 Xeon delivers 8115 FPS, V4 is slightly slower and we get 7207 FPS. Ryzen 5 5600 is noticeably faster, it outputs 8930 FPS. Now let's talk about the power consumption. Xeon E5-2697 V3 with the turbo boost unlock applied is faster than E5-2697A V4, but at what cost? Here I report entire system power consumption, and in general V3 system consumes additional 30 to 60 watts of electricity. It is a significant difference, even though it's not always the CPU's fault. When performance goes up, the GPU sucks more power from the wall, so let's compare the efficiency. In terms of watt per FPS, V3 Xeon can be just as good as V4, slightly worse than V4, or significantly worse than V4. It all depends on the game. For example, in City Skylines, E5-2697 V3 consumes 4.15 watts of electricity for a single frame rendered, while Xeon E5-2697A V4 requires only 3.54 watts of electricity for a single rendered frame. On the other hand, in Rainbow Six Extraction, the efficiency is almost identical. Both CPUs require about 1.81 watts to render a single frame. All in all, I would prefer a slightly slower but significantly more efficient E5-2697A V4 over E5-2697 V3 with the turbo boost unlock. Still, if electricity is very cheap in your country, then V3 is a very viable alternative. Please also keep in mind that higher power consumption means higher load on the motherboards via RAM. It's hard to make a direct cost comparison between these two Xeons with such a big difference in power consumption, but here we go anyway. The tested V4 setup with E5-2697A V4, Machinist X99 RS9 motherboard and 32 gigs of RAM right now would cost about 164 euros on AliExpress. The same setup, but with E5-2697 V3, would cost about 127 euros. If I average everything out, then you pay about 1.59 euro per FPS with the V4 and about 1.48 euro per FPS with V3 Xeon. At the same time, Xeon V3 delivers slightly better average FPS, 115 against 107 FPS. Even though 37-year price difference between V3 and V4 setups seems to be rather large, and it could be a difference between smaller and a bigger SSD, slower and faster graphics card, I would still prefer Xeon E5-2697A V4. Yes, the CPU is a bit slower and it is a bit more expensive, but at the same time it is significantly more power efficient and it does not require any BIOS tweaking. With the V3 Xeon, to achieve this level kind of performance, you need to apply the turbo boost unlock procedure, and even though with my Mi 899 application it is very easy to do for many of the motherboards, I still cannot cover each and every motherboard, and there is always a risk of breaking your motherboard when you mess with the BIOS. Ryzen 5 5600 is obviously a much better gaming CPU, and AMD AM4 is a much newer platform compared to the old LGA 2011 version 3, so I believe if you can, you better invest in AM4 than cheaping out with LGA 2011 version 3. Still, if electricity is cheap in your country and every penny counts, then V3 and V4 Xeons are still viable in January 2025. I hope I have demonstrated and explained clearly the pros and cons of V3 and V4 Xeons, and you will be able to make the right decision for you and pick either Ryzen or Xeon. With this, I have to say thanks for watching, thanks for listening, I hope it was useful, bye for now and see you in the next videos.